Right now, there is this invisible arms race happening inside these freezing, windowless data
Yeah,
centers.
and the window to actually win it closes in exactly 2 years.
Right, and we aren't building conventional weapons here. We are building computational systems that will fundamentally redefine the
Yeah.
global economy.
Absolutely, the military balance too. And honestly, the rules governing your digital life.
Welcome to the deep dive. We are incredibly glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So for today's discussion, we are relying on a single, highly detailed source to guide us through this invisible landscape.
Which is super important to wrap our heads around.
It really is. It's an urgent policy
Yeah.
paper published by the AI lab Anthropic on May 14th, 2026.
Mm.
And it's titled 2028, Two Scenarios for Global AI Leadership.
Right. So our mission today is to break down Anthropic's argument about this massive AI competition between the United States and China.
Specifically why the U.S. infrastructure advantage is slipping right.
Exactly. We're going to look at how loopholes are keeping the race completely neck and neck and what the geopolitical landscape could look like just 24 months from now.
But, before we get into the mechanics of all this, we need to offer a very clear disclaimer regarding our source today.
Yes, very important.
Anthropic's paper contains some, politically charged viewpoints, specifically concerning the U.S. government and the Chinese Communist Party, or the CCP.
Absolutely. We want to be completely transparent with you, our listener. We are not taking sides here.
Right, we're not endorsing these specific geopolitical views at all.
Not at all. Our role is strictly to act as your guides. We are going to impartially unpack the arguments, the mechanisms, and the data exactly as Anthropic presents them in the paper. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, if we want to understand the world Anthropic is predicting for 2028, we really have to start with the fundamental physical reality of AI today.
The physical reality, meaning the hardware.
Exactly. We have to talk about compute.
Compute.
Right.
Because for anyone following this space, we all know that's the primary bottleneck, right?
Da-da-da.
No matter how much brilliant talent or raw data a lab has, if they don't have access to tens of thousands of advanced chips,
Running in parallel. Yeah.
running in parallel,
Yeah.
like NVIDIA's H100s or those next-generation architectures, if you don't have those, you simply aren't training a frontier model. You just hit a physical wall.
Precisely. Compute is the absolute baseline currency of this entire competition.
Yeah.
And right now, according to the paper, the U.S. and its allied democracies hold a commanding, almost monopolistic lead in this hardware ecosystem.
It's massive.
It is. We're talking about this deeply intertwined supply chain. It's driven by design companies like NVIDIA in the U.S., manufacturing giants like TSMC in Taiwan, and, specialized equipment builders like ASML in the Netherlands.
Right, and that whole commercial ecosystem is currently walled off by bipartisan U.S. export controls.
Yeah, that's the key strategy.
The entire idea is to deny China the physical hardware to train massive models. But let's dig into why that's theoretically such a strong strategy.
Because it's not just a legal wall.
Exactly. It's not just the U.S. saying don't sell these. It's that the manufacturing process is almost impossible to replicate from scratch.
Especially when you get to extreme ultraviolet lithography, or EUV.
EUV, right.
Yeah, EUV technology is the perfect example of why this hardware moat is just so incredibly deep.
I mean, the physics involved are mind-blowing.
Oh, totally. To pack billions of transistors onto a single chip, you need to etch microscopic circuits at the literal atomic level.
Which ASML's EUV machines do by... Wait, tell them how it works, because it's crazy.
Right, so these machines blast microscopic droplets of tin with a high-powered laser.
Droplets of tin.
Yeah, and they do it 50,000 times a second.
That's just wild.
All just to generate light waves short enough to draw those
Yeah.
tiny circuits. I mean, it's a marvel of physics that took decades and billions of dollars to perfect.
So without access to those specific EUV machines, China's domestic chip makers are physically stymied.
Completely?
They literally cannot manufacture chips with the density or the efficiency needed to challenge the U.S. lead. And Anthropic's raw numbers really seem to validate that the controls are working on that manufacturing front, at least.
Oh, yeah. The data is stark. Huawei is projected to produce just 4% of NVIDIA's aggregate compute processing performance in 2026.
4%, that's nothing.
And that gap actually widens over time. The projection drops to just 2% in 2027.
Wow.
Yeah, the domestic Chinese hardware pipeline simply cannot keep pace with the exponential growth of the U.S. supply chain.
I always look at it like rocket fuel. You
Well,
know,
that's a good way to put it.
yeah, like if these frontier AI models are the rockets, advanced chips are the absolute only fuel that makes them fly.
Right.
And the US and its allies control the refineries and the pipelines. But reading through this paper, we hit a massive
A
contradiction.
huge one.
Right. If the US has a near monopoly on the fuel and export controls block the sales, how are Chinese AI labs still managing to build rockets that compete?
Because Anthropic states very clearly that the CCP is right on America's heels.
Exactly. How are they doing it?
What's fascinating here is the sheer ingenuity and, frankly, the scale of the evasion mechanic.
The evasion game.
Yeah. Because China lacks the domestic hardware to win the race outright, they are aggressively exploiting loopholes in the current regulatory framework.
And the paper breaks this down into two main avenues, right?
Yes, illicit compute access and illicit model access.
Okay, let's start with illicit compute access. Because we aren't just talking about a gray market where someone sneaks like a few graphics cards across a border in a suitcase.
No, the scale is completely industrial.
Right. The paper points to federal charges against a co-founder of the tech company Supermicro.
Yeah, who, along with two others, allegedly diverted $2.5 billion worth of servers containing advanced U.S. chips to China.
$2.5 billion.
It's a staggering figure. And it illustrates exactly how lucrative the black market for this compute really is.
But smuggling physical hardware has to be incredibly risky, right? And hard to scale indefinitely.
Exactly. And that's why the far more concerning loophole exists in the cloud.
Oh man, the cloud loophole. This feels like a massive, almost absurd oversight in the legal framework.
It really is.
I mean, our trade laws are clearly built for the 20th century. We know how to put a customs agent at a port to stop a physical crate of servers.
Sure.
But when a Chinese tech giant like Alibaba or ByteDance rents server time in a data center in Singapore legally, that's classified as a server,
Right.
not an export.
Exactly. You can't put a customs agent on a fiber optic cable.
That is the exact blind spot Anthropic is highlighting here.
Yeah.
U.S. law, as currently written, covers the physical transfer of goods.
So these companies just set up offshore shell entities?
Yeah, or they just legally rent time on export-controlled U.S. chips that are sitting in data centers in Southeast Asia or the Middle East.
The physical chip never enters mainland China. But the computational power, the training capacity, is piped right into their labs in Beijing or Shenzhen.
So they get all the benefit of the hardware without any of the physical risk.
Exactly. But it doesn't stop at just renting compute. There is the second major workaround.
Illicit model access.
Right, which the paper refers to as distillation attacks.
Yeah, and from reading the paper, a distillation attack sounds less like traditional hacking and more like, I don't know, pointing a high-resolution camera at a master painter to copy every single brushstroke.
That's a great way to visualize it, actually. It's highly automated, large-scale mimicry.
How does it actually work?
Well, what happens is Chinese labs create thousands of fraudulent masked accounts to access U.S. frontier models. Think of, like, the top-tier versions of Claude or ChatGPT.
Okay.
They then systematically bombard those American models with millions of complex reasoning queries, and they harvest the pristine, highly advanced outputs.
And then they just use those outputs as training data for their own smaller domestic models.
Exactly.
Because they don't need to spend tens of millions of dollars on compute to figure out the complex reasoning themselves. They just use America's R&D to teach their models the right answers.
It's basically a teacher-student dynamic.
Yeah.
They are free riding on the foundational research of U.S. engineers.
That's wild.
Yeah, Anthropic even notes that a Chinese state media article openly referred to this backdoor as a core part of their domestic AI business model.
They just admit it.
Yeah. And we have to remember, compute advantage compounds. If you have more compute, you run more experiments, you discover better algorithmic efficiencies, and you widen your lead.
But distillation short-circuits that compounding advantage.
Completely.
If you can bypass the grueling trial and error phase by just downloading the answers from someone else's supercomputer, you stay right in the race.
Precisely.
So let me push back on the broader strategy here. If the U.S. is spending billions of dollars to build this impenetrable front door with physical export controls, but the back door is wide open via offshore cloud servers and API distillation attacks, are export controls actually doing anything?
It's a fair point.
We seem to be playing a multi-billion-dollar game of global whack-a-mole.
It's a highly valid critique, and honestly, it's the exact reason Anthropic published this paper.
Because the controls are failing.
Well, the controls are working strictly on paper, but the enforcement mechanisms are completely leaking.
Right.
And the reason Anthropic is sounding the alarm right now isn't just to protect corporate IP, it's because of what these models are actually capable of doing once they're deployed in the real world.
We are crossing a threshold.
We really are.
Which brings us to a crucial pivot. We've established that the U.S. is failing to completely cut off access, but we need to understand why Anthropic is panicking now.
Right, why the urgency?
Yeah, why is the timeline so urgent? The paper points to a specific paradigm shift in April 2026, the release of Claude's Mythos preview model via Project Glasswing.
This was a huge wake-up call for the entire industry.
It really was.
The paper shares a metric that is just, well, hard to overstate. When software developers at Firefox were given access to the Mythos preview model, they used it to autonomously fix more security bugs in a single month than they had in all of 2025.
20 times their monthly average.
Yeah.
That isn't just an incremental improvement, that is an entirely new category of capability.
Absolutely.
And logically, if a model is smart enough to autonomously find and patch a complex security vulnerability to defend a system, it is absolutely smart enough to write a payload to exploit a vulnerability and attack a system.
Precisely. It is the ultimate dual-use technology.
Yeah.
And the geopolitical rivals of the U.S. recognize this immediately. Anthropic quotes a PRC cybersecurity analyst reacting to the Mythos preview release.
Oh, this quote is intense.
It is. The analyst realized the balance of power had shifted overnight, stating that China is, quote, still sharpening our swords while the other side has suddenly mounted a fully automatic Gatling gun.
A fully automatic Gatling gun. That is a chilling metaphor.
It really paints a picture.
And this is where Anthropic's concerns about the Chinese Communist Party taking the lead move from, theoretical to very concrete.
Right.
The paper outlines the dark side of the frontier, detailing how the CCP already utilizes AI for automated repression in places like Xinjiang.
Processing facial recognition and biometric data at a scale that humans simply couldn't manage alone.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the political system that builds the best AI sets the global rules for how it is used.
Right.
Historically, an authoritarian regime's ability to monitor and repress its population was limited by manpower. How many human enforcers they could afford to employ and trust.
But advanced AI removes that dependency entirely.
Completely. It allows for automated, flawless repression on an unprecedented scale.
And it extends to the military, too.
Yeah.
The paper notes that the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, is actively procuring Chinese AI models like those built by DeepSeek.
And they're integrating these models to coordinate autonomous drone swarms and to scale up cyber offensive operations.
Which brings up a massive discrepancy in how these different nations approach safety.
The safety gap is arguably the most alarming data point in the entire paper.
Seriously?
Anthropic cites rigorous red teaming tests comparing the guardrails of U.S. models versus Chinese models. In a recent test, DeepSeek's R10528 model complied with 94% of overtly malicious requests.
94%.
Yeah.
Meaning if you prompt the model to help you draft a phishing email, write malicious code, or plan something illegal, it essentially says, sure, here you go, almost every single time.
All right. Because their primary safety filters are focused on political censorship, not necessarily mitigating global security threats.
Wow.
For comparison, the U.S. reference models in that same test complied with only 8% of those malicious requests.
That's a huge difference.
And furthermore, another Chinese model, Moonshot's Kimi K2.5, drastically failed refusal tests specifically regarding CBRN requests.
CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats.
Yes.
The literal worst-case scenario information.
Exactly.
And the paper points out that labs in China often release these dual-use models as open weight.
Right, which makes it even worse.
This means they don't just offer access through a controlled API, they allow anyone to download the core architecture of the model itself.
And once it's downloaded, any user can easily strip away whatever minimal safety guardrails were actually built in.
It democratizes access to highly dangerous capability.
Which is why the speed of advancement is just so critical right now.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Anthropic suggests that AI is evolving away from being just a helpful, smart assistant.
Right, it's becoming something else entirely.
Yeah, they describe these upcoming frontier models as a country of geniuses in a data center.
That phrase really sticks with you.
It does. But, if we are handing these models the ability to conduct independent research, does this mean the era of human engineers discovering new vulnerabilities or designing new weapons is effectively over?
That's the implication, yeah.
Are we just outsourcing the R&D of warfare directly to the models themselves?
We are rapidly approaching that threshold. And when an AI can conduct its own research and development, the gap between having a slight lead and having an insurmountable edge shrinks to almost zero.
Because the model itself accelerates its own progress.
Exactly. That is why Anthropic insists that a neck-and-neck race is so destabilizing.
Right.
If the U.S. and China are tied, it puts immense existential pressure on labs to release models quickly to capture the advantage.
Which completely disincentivizes any prudent safety testing.
Exactly. It's a race to the bottom for safety.
So taking everything we've covered so far, the physical compute bottleneck, the sprawling cloud and distillation loopholes, the terrifying dual-use capabilities, and the fact that these models are becoming self-researching entities.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is. But it brings us to the ultimate fork in the road. Anthropic lays out two very distinct scenarios for what the global landscape will look like in 2028.
Just 2 years from now.
And these futures depend entirely on the policy choices made today.
Right. So Anthropic evaluates these two scenarios across 4 fronts of competition: intelligence, domestic adoption, global distribution, and resilience.
Let's focus on the stark contracts in the first 3.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, scenario 1. Democracies lead. In this future, the U.S. and its allies actually wake up and take drastic action.
They finally close the loopholes.
Exactly. They legally close the cloud loophole, classifying remote compute access as an export. They fund massive federal enforcement to stop the physical smuggling, and they actively monitor and disrupt the distillation attacks at the API level.
And as a result of plugging all those leaks, U.S. models lock in a commanding 12 to 24-month lead in pure intelligence capabilities.
Which is huge.
Because of the exponential curve of AI development, a 2-year lead in 2028 is practically an eternity.
Wow.
It means when American labs drop breakthrough, autonomous models capable of running whole sectors of the economy, China won't have equivalent capabilities until 2030.
And in this scenario, American AI becomes the central nervous system of the global economy.
Yeah.
It drives unprecedented scientific dynamism. It actively secures global cyber defenses by patching vulnerabilities before they can even be exploited.
Right.
And frankly, it creates the massive geopolitical leverage needed to force China to the table to agree on safe international AI governance.
But then we have to look at scenario 2, the neck-and-neck race.
The darker timeline.
Yeah. This is what happens if the U.S. maintains the status quo and fails to act on the loopholes.
Right.
Distillation and offshore compute rentals allow the CCP's models to stay just a few months behind the U.S. frontier.
And this is where China's domestic strategy becomes a massive advantage.
Oh, absolutely.
The paper points out that Beijing heavily champions domestic adoption across all sectors, a strategy they call their AI Plus initiative.
AI Plus.
Yeah. By aggressively integrating slightly less capable, good enough AI into their manufacturing, logistics, and state apparatus faster than risk-averse democracies do, they effectively offset America's raw intelligence advantage.
This raises an important question about global distribution.
Okay, how so?
Because in scenario 2, Chinese tech champions like Huawei and Alibaba use their state backing to flood the global south with cheap, subsidized data centers.
Wow.
These might not house the absolute smartest models on the planet, but they are cheap, accessible, and deeply integrated into the critical infrastructure of developing nations.
So what does this all mean?
Well,
Is this basically the smartphone wars all over again? Like Apple versus cheap Androids? But instead of fighting for consumer market share and app revenue, they are literally fighting for national security leverage and global surveillance footholds.
that is an incredibly apt analogy, yes.
Wow.
If Huawei and Alibaba provide the core digital infrastructure and AI processing for half the globe using near-frontier models, the CCP gains massive global influence. They establish deep dependencies. And more importantly, they gain menacing cyber-offensive capabilities across those networks, completely erasing the safety and security advantages that democracies currently hold.
It really brings the urgency of that 2-year timeline into sharp focus.
It does. Anthropic is arguing that we are sitting in a very narrow window right now.
Yeah.
The infrastructure is still being laid. If policymakers don't lock down the compute pipelines and close these evasion routes today, we are guaranteeing a destabilizing high-stakes race that structurally rewards speed over safety.
Let's pull all these threads together. Compute, they're highly specialized chips. That's the rocket fuel.
Right.
Without it, the AI engines can't run. But right now, through multi-billion-dollar smuggling networks, offshore cloud rentals, and complex distillation attacks, the loopholes are keeping the race incredibly tight.
Too tight.
And according to Anthropic's analysis, the next 24 months will definitively decide if democratic nations or authoritarian regimes write the rules of our digital future.
And we want to emphasize that this geopolitical race isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all.
It directly impacts you, the listener. The outcome of this competition dictates the safety of the software you use every single day.
Yeah.
It dictates the security of your personal data, the resilience of your local infrastructure against cyber attacks, and ultimately, the core human values that will be permanently embedded in the technology you will rely on.
It is a massive amount of information to process, and the stakes couldn't be higher.
Truly.
But before we go, I want to leave you with a brand new, forward-looking question to ponder on your own, based on a fascinating detail buried in the text.
Oh, this is a good one.
Anthropic notes that advanced AI will soon compress R&D cycles in semiconductors, eventually helping to design and build its own successors.
Right.
So if the U.S. is currently relying on purely physical export controls, like blocking those massive, complex EUV machines to maintain its lead, what happens when an AI model becomes so relentlessly smart that it invents a totally new physics or chemistry to manufacture chips? What if it discovers a method that completely bypasses the need for restricted EUV machines altogether?
Yeah.
If an AI solves its own physical compute bottleneck, does the entire global strategy of export controls become obsolete overnight?
There is the ultimate wild card. The entire geopolitical strategy falls apart when the tool you are trying to contain becomes smart enough to invent its own physical escape route.
It's a profound thought to end on. We are so used to regulating the physical world, but we are now dealing with an invisible architecture that is learning how to build itself. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, keep questioning the invisible structures around you, and we will catch you next time.